In 2011, the Fukushima nuclear disaster resulted in 500,000 residents relocated, and it rallied an international outcry against nuclear power plants, questioning its safety and role in future of energy. The repercussions are still being felt today, with the Japanese government now releasing nuclear wastewaters from the incident affecting fishing areas in Asia. Why would I start with the story of Fukushima disaster in a video about hydrogen energy? Well, because they are not unconnected. Japan is an energy-scarce country, and its energy scarcity has defined its recent history. Starting with the 70s oil crisis, Japan has never ceased to find alternatives to fossil fuels. But the Fukushima disaster dealt a decisive blow to Japanese energy market. No matter how safe nuclear energy may be in the future, the result of Fukushima is that the Japanese public no longer trust nuclear energy. It's hard enough for politicians in Japan to keep its existing 36 nuclear power plants. Japan has to find an alternative, and they have two options: solar and hydrogen. And the Japanese bet hard on hydrogen, including plans to build hydrogen buses and cars. During the recent Tokyo Olympics, you may have noticed Japanese hydrogen buses. They look great, and the Olympics was a great publicity move. However, if you look at the number of hydrogen cars running on the road, it tells a different story. When it comes to sales, hydrogen cars are in low demand. Only 7,500 cars are sold in 2020. And when it comes to infrastructure, hydrogen refueling station is scarce. Only 43 refueling stations in the United States in 2020. And if you look deeper into the hydrogen cars sold, the Japanese is alone as well. As of 2020, 3 car companies have commercial fuel cell EVs: Honda, Toyota, and Hyundai. Among the 3, Honda has suspended its fuel cell EV offering, and Hyundai is also favoring battery electric vehicles over fuel cell EVs, leaving Toyota alone to support the entire hydrogen car market. This reflected the title of the video, Japan's Big Lonely Bet on Hydrogen. Hydrogen energy is lost because the rest of the world is not playing along with Japan. And even for the Korean Hyundai, it is not 100% in hydrogen. Everyone is hedging. But if you compare that with the battery electric vehicle supply chain, China is invested heavily in the value chain, starting with the sourcing materials to battery production, battery pack production, EV production, and finally, China is the biggest consumer market for electric vehicles, with many international EV brands like NIO and Xiaopeng. Why would China help Japan's hydrogen cars compete with its domestic champions? It won't. The same reasoning goes to the United States and the European Union. Tesla could be the Apple of EV. Why would the United States help Japan compete against Tesla? Here's a list of electric cars. If you rank the cars by performance, do you notice something? Electric cars are adopted by companies in the United States, China, and Europe, whereas for hydrogen cars, only Japan is the player. It is Japan's failure to work with other countries on the hydrogen supply chain that resulted in today's hydrogen mobility landscape. This is the top 10 companies' fuel cell patent count in 2019. Needless to say, the Japanese companies dominate. If you are not sure which ones are Japanese, they are Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Panasonic, and Denso. The only American company on the list is GM. Japan has started its domestic hydrogen push in the 1970s as a result of the rising oil prices during the oil crisis. Energy anxiety has pushed Japan to develop domestic fossil fuel alternatives, and hydrogen become the natural choice. Today, the Japanese government is still the biggest investor of hydrogen among many other governments. Almost half of the global hydrogen investment comes from Japan, but they have failed to help other countries in the hydrogen market to thrive. China has conveniently pushed aside hydrogen investment, as seen in this graph, severely underinvested in hydrogen, less than even South Korea. This is reflective of many Japanese champions and their culture of work. Nintendo, Sony cameras, PlayStation are all dominant in their respective field. Here's a list of Japanese companies ranked by market cap. I bet you do not know many of them. Japanese companies thrive in a semi-closed ecosystem working among themselves to build industries. But even for Japan, the auto industry is too big to solo. If they have shared their hydrogen technology early on with other countries in the 1980s, perhaps the EV landscape may be different today. This shows to me two things. That first, the most sophisticated competition nowadays happen at a national level. It would be gullible of us to assume that nations don't compete on behalf of their national champions, of course. The current struggle between China and the United States on semiconductors is a good example. Secondly, there are limitations when it comes to monopoly at a national level. You need friends and partners in other countries to navigate the consumer landscape. Else, partners become competitors and friends become enemies. When your competitors include China, plus the United States, plus Europe, you can be sure that they're going to favor their domestic champions who provide alternatives. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of energy efficiency and safety in choosing battery electric vehicles in the consumer vehicles market. In fact, I have a separate video explaining those factors. What I'm trying to say today is that to the Japanese conglomerates, they need to be open-minded in sharing technology along the value chain to partners in order to create a shared future and a shared sense of destiny. You may be able to create a few good products in the vertical alone, but it would be really hard for any one country nowadays to solo and dominate an entire industry.